Don't act like you can't hear me.
Hello.
Hey, Dr. Lamb.
How's everybody?
Doing well. Hey, everybody.
Well, what's happening today? What's the news of the world?
Well, the governor didn't tell us a whole lot.
No. I put out that notice earlier today about graduation.
Yeah, I put mine in my shells. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I agree, Ingrid. Everybody's kind
Everybody is, and
not knowing what to expect, what to do. The leaders in the schools are really at a standstill. They don't really know that. I mean, there's nothing they can do at this point as far as making definitive plans.
Well,
that's what we're
like
running into that with our master schedule.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that master schedule is going to be determined a lot. You know, if it goes back to the individual counties or the individual units, you know, everybody's going to do their own thing. And if they go with an A-B schedule, that is going to majorly impact scheduling.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Especially at our high school levels. Like,
yeah.
It's in, you know, like for our school, we're dealing with 2,300 kids.
Right.
And our county just sent out a form for parents to elect if they want to be virtual or in person if we're given the option. And the comment on it is every student has to fill it out, and if it's not done, the schools will be following up. And I'm like,
right.
We have a month before teachers return, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
This is Carrie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Carrie.
Yeah, Carrie, you are at an extremely large school, just as Allen is. Allen is in. Allen has his school is almost like a university.
Mm-hmm. And as I'm sitting there going, I already know who's going to get the task of calling these kids that don't fill it out.
Right.
Because I've been at the school every day. Like, I've been there every day this summer.
But you know, you can have 300, you can have 2,500, and you can have 200. But the issues are the same no matter what when it comes to having to what have you got to do. So the principal with the small school has the same issues really as the principal with the big school.
Yeah, the big thing we're running into is like we can't hand reschedule them. Like they're going to have to open it back up to where we can reload Power School.
Right. Well, I know this sounds crazy, but I found it much easier to be principal of a large senior high school with 3,000 kids than I did an elementary school with 800.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I had help.
That's what I say, because you've got a lot more. Like our school, we have 5 APs plus the principal.
Exactly. I had 6.
Yeah, Alan, how many APs? Alan, how many APs at your school?
We got 14 APs.
14 assistant principals.
And we actually, at one point, were operating with, I think, 17. And through reassignment and some other reasons, we're down to 14. But we honestly need 17 because of all of the stuff that, as you guys know, that.
Where are you at, Alan?
Mount Pleasant, South Carolina.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we were thrilled that we got a 5th one. Like, that was a huge deal for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
like I have, people say, how many bosses do you have? I have 15.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the good thing about having, if you organize correctly, you can break it into, and you've got enough people to lead smaller groups. Problem when you're like me, now remembering I was a senior high principal in a large urban district. I was an elementary principal at the start of my career in a small rural district where I didn't even have an assistant principal. I had 800 kids with no AP. And
Mhm.
oh, by the way, Dr. Stedman will remember this, we were one of the 15 career development pilots in the state back in the 80s. That meant you had to do 3 times as many evaluations on your certified staff as normal because it was for pay differentiation. We actually had career development pilot program actually differentiated pay in North Carolina. You were status 1, 2, 3, and you could make more pay without additional degrees according to your job performance in terms of observations. And so can you imagine how many formal observations I had to do? Now, the district did assign me an outside observer evaluator to help with those only, but only one. And so scheduling, all the things that we had to do, you say, well, elementary scheduling is easy. Not so much, because remember, I had, it was a K-6. And so the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders moved like a middle school. They changed classes in the intermediate program. And so, yeah, I mentioned to one of the VPs at Gardner Webb last week that I thought they were trying to figure out space. They're only going to be allowed to put half the capacity of a classroom in classrooms on campus this fall. They're hell bent on reopening. I said, I'd just do an AB day schedule. And I might as well have said, you might as well jump up on the moon. He had no concept of what an AB schedule was. And see, that's part of the problem that at every level of education is you have people who have positions who don't have the knowledge that goes along with that, that you might need in times of a pandemic. They're totally unprepared. And so I said, if I'll spend an hour with you if you want to learn how to do an AB schedule. We won't even talk about something as intricate as a mosaic like you might do at the high school. I'm quite sure Allen's High School has a mosaic schedule. That means everybody doesn't follow the same schedule. Different parts of the group follow different schedules. That's called a mosaic. We didn't get into that very deeply this semester because it's so unusual and it's so specific to where you are. That's what mosaic means. There is no set mosaic schedule. It means that that everyone is individualized for that school. And certain groups have, in a mosaic, you can have a block for part of the students, you can have an AB for part of the others, you can have a straight, you can have whatever. And you have to learn how to put all that together. But you have to kind of be there at that school to do that and learn that. That's one of those things that, I would recommend that colleges do a mosaic. Different, like say the history department they don't have to be face-to-face. Science department does in labs. I mean, that's the kind of thing that our high schools are going to have to figure out as well. And as we go forward with hybrid, is they're going to have to figure out how that everybody's not the same. Everybody doesn't have the same needs in terms of what they need to meet every time. You folks have some expertise now in scheduling because that's what we worked on this semester. You learned a lot through the OMA on the priority of your federal programs got to come first, then your state law, then federal law, then local policy, federal, state, local. Your EVOS, your performance data, and then teacher input. You learned the rationale, which is if you learn that and you understand that, you have the knowledge base to be able to schedule most anything. But you have to understand that first.
You know what I think is going to happen, Dr. Lamb? State law is going to, this summer, state law in the next couple of weeks is going to say, local, you handle it your way, because they don't know what to do.
Well, I told you I listen in on the state board meetings on Friday morning because it affects us in this class and what we do. And I think you're exactly right. They've been trending that way for the last couple of weeks. I think you're exactly right.
That's why the governor wouldn't say anything today. He's not ready for what's going to happen when
the state board is still in discussion. But I think that's what they're going to do. You're exactly right. As I listen to them on Friday mornings, They're pretty much, they understand that you can't make the same rule for Charlotte as you do for Burke County,
Mm-mm.
you know, or Greene County. Greene County's got, 3 schools, elementary, a middle, and a high school. I mean, you can't make the same rules for everybody. Doesn't work the same. And then access, we've talked about that, access. Everybody doesn't have access to internet hotspots.
Yeah,
It's
my
really-
county doesn't.
It's really brought about a disparity in funding, which is where I wanted to start tonight to follow up. Let me share my screen. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. And before we get started, prayers for Paulette. Add her to your prayer list, our classmate Paulette. Make sure you add her to our prayer list. It's tough times for everybody. And so prayers for Paulette and for her family. Let me share my screen and get started. Move this out of the way and get here where I am here. I want to pull this one up. As a follow-up to last week on funding, I sent you this article. I want to explain this one. Make sure. So what this superintendent who had to resign, what she did was she attempted to manipulate local money. So in her district, there was the rule in her district, the policy was of that discretionary fund that we've talked about that superintendents have, that general fund that's not earmarked for any specific thing. But still, there's a limit on how much you can spend out of that at one time without board approval, and then district, your county or city commissioner approval. So in this particular district, Chapel Hill Carborough, they had, their rule was the superintendent could spend up to $90,000 on a purchase order, but after that, they would have to, from that general fund, after that, it would have to be a line item in the budget approved first by, of course, the Board of Education, and then eventually by the funding authority, which is your county commissioners or your city commissioners, as in this case in Chapel Hill Carborough. And so what she attempted to do, just like in our case last week, the superintendent, he had moved some of that general fund money to 4 schools, but then he said, well, I'm going to move all of it. Well, you can't move state money. You can't move federal money. Leandro said, you can't move federal money. Leandro said you can't move state money. So people said, well, maybe he was just talking about local money. Well, again, you can't move local money either. There's a limit on how much of that you can, and in this particular district, it was $90,000. And so she bought a program which seems like a wonderful program. Was designed to close the district's racial and ethnic achievement gap. A worthy cause, but it cost about $800,000. Well, so what she had to do was send 12 different purchase orders to get around the law/policy that she could only approve up to $90,000 expenditure. Anything over that required a line item in the budget, had to be approved by the local Board of Education and by the commissioners in Chapel Hill Carborough, who actually give them the money. And so that's what this was about. This mirrors our case from last week. This is what happens in the real world when you don't realize those laws and policies are in place, and it might be the very best thing in the world that you're trying to do. And that's, in Eric's reflection, he pointed that out, and I appreciate that. Thank you for that, Eric, for your reflection. I won't argue that we shouldn't be doing something about equity. I won't argue that this like this superintendent, that wasn't the right thing. My job is to make sure you understand law and policy and that you don't lose your house. Now, this lady got a little severance. She got $106,000 severance. She got half a year's salary. But I don't know that she'll ever get another job in the business. I don't know what she's going to do the rest of her life. I don't know how old she is. I don't know anything about her personal finances. That's not the point. But her career is over. You say, well, I'll take 106,000, but yeah, people who make that kind of money tend to have big bills as well. But her career is effectively over now. I don't know if this kind of thing follows you. I don't know what kind of job she could get from now on. Again, that's not the point of the story, but the point of the story is, regardless of how efficacious or how wonderful or how needed or how appropriate the program would be, you can't be spending money any way that you want to. You've got to follow the laws and the policies on money. And that's what they're hiring you to do at the principal level and at the superintendent level. Some of you will become superintendents after your principals. And you've got to know that, you know, there's always going to be somebody watching and knowing. And see, what got this lady was there was a former principal right here, former elementary school principal in Chapel Hill, who understood and knew what the law was and understood that. Now, I won't say why this lady, Victoria Creamer, did what she did. I don't know why. She said she was a parent and had kids in the high school, and they were taking money from her kids, I guess. And so I don't know. You can Google her and make just like I did, and make your own conclusions about why she, you know, why she got involved in this. I mean, she might have just been one of those folks who right's right and wrong's wrong, and she might have had her own political agenda. I don't know. But this is what happens when you don't, you know, you say, well, I know I can't move federal money or state money, but boy, I can do some fast accounting on that local money. No, you can't. That money, other than that one general fund, has to be line itemed, and you're restricted to what that line item is. So you can't just be moving money around. So that's kind of the backside of that. And then the other one is the superintendent in Wayne County resigned. I think I mentioned that one because of their budget shortfall. Now, I don't know why. I still can't get any notion of why there's a budget shortfall. And so they're trying to do an audit to figure out why there's a budget shortfall of $5 million in Goldsboro. I don't have any notion as to why. And the only reason he told it is they weren't going to be able to send out the county supplement checks. And that's when he went, and of course, you know, when if he told the Board of Education the school system was broke and they would have needed emergency bailout from the county commissioners. Again, the school board is unempowered in North and South Carolina. They can't tax you. They can't go out and get more money. If you run out of money in the school system, what do you have to do? You have to go to the county commission. So it wasn't like they could figure out a way to get their own money. So he told them, we're broke, we're out of money, you're going to have to go to the county commissioners, and oh, by the way, I resigned. I'm guessing that was shortly before they would have had an executive session and fired him. I don't know that, but I suspect that's what it was. And so I don't know where the money went. But this is not like they didn't get money in because of COVID. The budget was set, they got the money. Somehow they spent $5 million. Now, on an aside note, I understand they had a lot of cost overruns on construction. Remember, who has to pay for construction of schools and facilities? Who pays capital? That's local money. That's not federal or state money, unless you get one of those pork barrel grants from the lottery from the state, which are few and far between. So we all understand that local money has to pay for buildings and the upkeep of those buildings. They had some construction projects that cost overrun, I understood. Well, that would come straight out of the county's money. And so they ran out of money. And so, again, I don't know enough to comment other than somebody's got to be watching that. And it doesn't matter how we got, it doesn't matter how we got there. When you get there, you're the one because you were in charge. This is another example of, regardless how we got there, we're there. And that's the end of it. That's the end of him as well. Now, I have no notion if there'll be any criminal charges or any of those kinds of things. I have no notion of that. I'm not saying the man took a penny, but on his watch, they're $5 million short. They're broke and they can't pay supplements. That is not good.
Dr. Lamb, from students from that county and around the county said that there is a lot of speculation going on right now in
Yes.
that area.
And again, I've read a lot of that. I don't know. That's why I say I don't know whether the money got, somebody absconded with the money, whether it was fraudulent purchase orders. I don't know if it was just simple cost overruns. I've heard so many different things from that county. Don't know.
But guess what? We will know.
Yeah.
Somebody will find out.
Yeah. But what I do know is he's unemployed now, and he's pretty much unemployable. Well, now, he looks like it, I don't mean to be flippant, but I mean, I'm sure he can find something, but it's not going to be the kind of money that he's used to making. And generally, when you make big money, you have big bills. So I don't know. But in the end, you don't want this to happen to you if it doesn't devastate you and your family. You never want to lose your house. And so these are two that have happened just this summer since we've been in class. This is a normal in our business. People don't observe. Even people you think that are in positions to know don't know how money can be spent, or don't monitor how the money is spent, or attempt to circumvent the rules, the law or policy on how money can be spent. Dr. Stedman and I have been in the business for about 40 years each, or maybe a little more than 40 years. I can't remember a time when there wasn't one of these cases happening over the money being gone or misspent poorly or whatever. It happens all the time. And usually there's a tragedy that accompanies it. In our era, they used to call it your money or your honey. That one or the other was what was going to get you, especially as a principal. Having inappropriate relationships on campus or spending money inappropriately, that's what they'd get you for. You could do most anything else, but you couldn't do those things. And that's still true today. That is still true today. So that kind of concludes this. Again, I want to commend all of you for what a tremendous job you did on last week's case study. Ingrid, Kareem, and Kishlin, who kicked us off last week. Tremendous work. Thank you for all that you did, the digging. That's what I want you to be, scholars. I want you to have a quest for knowledge. As you already know, Dr. Stedman and I, we can't tell you everything. We don't know everything. Sometimes we think we do, but we really don't. But what we want for you is to know how to learn and how to dig, because the law is tough. Oh gosh, it's tough. It changes. It can be interpreted. You got to stay with it. You've really got to stay with it and stay up. But if you do, you'll be able to do good things for your school and community and for the kids in that school and community. All right, before we get to this, I do want to go over and look at our case study for next week. And this was case study 1 from last week. I want to look quickly at case study 2 for next week. This one seems fairly straightforward. Let me see case study 3 for next week. I'm sorry. We are normal to about two students from the LGBTQ community who were having a relationship at their school. I want you to focus on 2 things. I mean, we know what the law is. It's been reaffirmed last week by the Supreme Court. But what I really want you to do, I want you to focus on 2 things most specifically. Number 1 is antecedent behaviors. It appears that Jimmy and Willie's public displays of affection got out of control, and that's what kind of got the community up in an uproar to start with. Is not understanding how the little things become the big things. I want you to look specifically at that. And under this week, I have an entire presentation on antecedent behaviors, how those things link. I want you to look specifically at that. And the other thing, which is most relevant for what's going on in our world today, with all the protests of various kinds, is the notion or the the function or the theorem of heckler's veto. I want you to look specifically at heckler's veto. And for those of you who are not familiar with heckler's veto, that's when we deny one group's rights because we're afraid of what the opposing group will do to them. And so instead of addressing the group that's engaging in the unlawful behavior, we punish the victim. That's what heckler's veto is about. I want you to look at that, and we can come up with 1,000 examples. I was actually reading one from St. Louis right before the class, a case that's going to hit the courts in St. Louis, where I take your rights away from you as the victim because I'm afraid of what the other group will do to you. We saw some of that this spring, where police tried to keep one group from protesting at another group's protest because the original group was armed. And they were like, well, we can't let you protest, they might shoot you. Well, here's a notion: unarm the people who are protesting rather than telling the other group that they can't protest. And that's what we're talking about here. That's the current example of we're going to take your rights away because these other people are acting unlawful. That's what heckler's veto is. So in this case that we're coming up for us next week, the principal invoked, obviously heckler's veto is illegal and unconstitutional. It violates the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. But what the principal did was ban Jimmy and Willie from the prom because she was afraid that they might be harmed by other people who came to the prom. They'd been threatened. Well, instead of stopping the threat, the simple solution for her was to ban Jimmy and Willie. So that's the example of heckler's veto. So I want you to look specifically at antecedent behaviors, the failure of the school administration to address Jimmy and Willie's behavior that incited the community, and then in response to that incitement, the principal invoked heckler's veto, which again is illegal and unconstitutional, but she did it anyway in order to try to keep Jimmy and Willie safe. So make sure that you understand the two legal points that are most salient in this, and of course LGBTQ rights, which have been upheld. Obviously that's overarching, but within the case, there's always cases within the cases. So make sure that you look at that. All right. So that's that. Looking at this week, you should be getting near the end of the skip. You should be at skip task 2. You need to try to, we've got 3 more weeks after tonight. So we need to be kind of rounding out the skip. Some of you have already moved into the cap. Some of you have already moved into the solid. So, but I think I know everybody's through with the OMA. Everybody's in the skip. Just, we don't do weekly turn-ins in terms of late or whatever. You know how to manage your own time. So you should be about midway through the skip at least, and you'll be fine. Remember, don't worry if you turn something in on Monday. I grade Monday same as I did Sunday. I know it's getting to be that time of year. It's getting anxiety level is high. We were talking as we opened up tonight over what's going to happen in schools. And so we don't really know. And, some people are vacationing, some aren't. Some have already had to go back to work. So I understand we got some time since we aren't completing this semester in terms of you aren't graduating or completing your program. I can give you some time on into August to finish things up if you need be, but just be aware of your time. You should be somewhere about the middle of the skip right now. In terms of our discussion boards, I had a couple of those that I wanted to point out. We should be about at 5 and 6 right now. On 5, I thought Nathan made a good point this week on due process. When he talked with his principal, we want to support teachers, but just like our first case, will Bobby strike Bobby out? It's hard to support a teacher who's broken the law, who's not afforded a kid due process, who hadn't followed all the policies. It's hard to do that. I mean, you want to support teachers in discipline, but you can't if they didn't follow law and policy. That's the thing you've got to remember is you can only support them if they support you in terms of upholding law and policy. Nathan made a good point in his this week. Thank you for that. Rakita made a good point today, or made one in terms of a point that she made in her response to our case study from last week. I wanted to point that out. It's not always about the money. I thought that was a good point. And then we had several of you who did a good job with your liability at the end. It all starts with making that call to 911. If you don't do that, everything else, nothing else will be right. If you get that one wrong, it has to start with that, and then follow your district's policy on dealing with the media and parents. But you know, I think everybody got. I'd call out individual, but I think everybody got that one right. You got to call 911. You're not a medical doctor. You can't assess. Sometimes there's hidden injuries. That's that nonfeasance where you didn't do anything. If you didn't call, that's gonna come back to get you under those standards of misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. Nonfeasance is you didn't bother to call. They're going to get you on negligence. If it's determined later that there was injuries that you couldn't see, it's not going to go well for you. So that's that. All right. Any questions going forward on any of the things that we've kind of done our housekeeping tonight on all the things where we need to be? I want to spend some time tonight on what I consider to be, let me get over here. What I consider to be probably the most important of the manuals that you will work with at the assistant principal level. And that is the disciplinary data reporting procedures manual. Please remember that this is the companion to Power School. This tells you how everything is supposed to go in there. We've looked at this briefly throughout the semester. I told you we would spend a night where we would spend maybe a half an hour diving into this thing. And I'm going to kind of roll through it. If you have some questions, don't hesitate to pop in with those, but I'm going to kind of hit the highlights of this manual. You don't have to memorize them, but you have to know that they're here, and you should have this thing. I always encouraged my folks to go ahead and print it out, have a hard copy, or have it saved in a way that they could access it easily electronically, or have a hard copy. Because always when you need it, your internet's down in the school business. You know how that goes. And so, all right. So the first part, and I always like this. People, my first 10 years in the business, I didn't really know what DPI was either. I didn't know why them people was always bothering me. But once you get further into the organization, you move into administration, you begin to realize DPI is created to be like the central office in a school district. They're there to carry out the laws and policies, the laws of the General Assembly, and the policies of the State Board of Education. Just like the central office staff is there to carry out the laws and policies of your district. That's what DPI does for the state of North Carolina, and for the Department of Education does in the state of South Carolina. It's their role to interpret and work with you to understand and follow the laws and policy. Again, law being from the legislature, policy being from the State Board of Education. So you will see throughout this document, you'll see some of its laws and some of its policy, but understand it's their job to interpret and enforce those from both of those judicial bodies. that make law and policy or legislative. They act as legislative bodies. And so you need to understand that. So when DPI says something to you, or in South Carolina, the Department of Ed says something to you, and you wonder, well, why they think they can tell me that? Well, they can, because they're telling you as a proxy for legislators and board members of the Board of Education. They are their proxy in dealing with day-to-day with schools and school districts. And so that's where their authority and autonomy comes from. They are not an elected body. They are staff, but they carry out the laws and policy of elected bodies. They are the professional staff. So you need to understand that first and foremost. This is a law class. We always try to track those kinds of things. And so that's where their authority comes from state legislatures and state board members. All right. So if you understand that, then you realize, yeah, I got to do what they say. It's not optional. This isn't a suggestion. And once you understand that and accept that, the manual gets easier to take. See, I had folks forever that I don't agree with that. I don't want to do that. Well, this is not about. We're not asking you we're not asking you if you liked it or not, or if you agreed with it. You got to understand this is the law. I don't think who is DPI? I don't think I'll have to do what they say. Well, on their own, they're just professional staff, but it's who they represent. And once you get that, it kind of gets you over that hump. Yeah, we got to do this. And no, we can't make it optional in our district, or we can't have our own way that we do things or we don't do it that way in our district. We do it. Well, no, you don't. You do until you get caught. As many times have you heard me say, it's all fun and games when somebody gets their eye put out. We can do whatever we want to until we get caught, until somebody sues us. And then we have no protection because we didn't follow the rules. And so data from Power School, this data is entered into Power School. You have to put all of it in there, regardless of how severe it was. It doesn't matter, because we do all of our civil rights reporting out of Power School as well. But here's kind of the first big one that we have to get over is data reporting is organized around incidents, what occurred, not what we did as a result of. So that knocks out that idea. Well, if I don't suspend that kid, I don't have to report it. Suspension is an outcome. It's a consequence. We do not organize disciplinary data around outcomes or consequences. We organize them around what happened. It's kind of like the notion is if we went by the notion of outcomes or consequences, then one could rightfully argue if Dr. Stedman shot me, if he didn't get caught, I wouldn't be dead. Whether he gets caught or not has nothing to do with whether I'm dead. That I got shot is what we got to report. It's kind of like what I hear about COVID testing. Well, we can stop the spread if we stop testing. No, it won't stop the spread. Whether we test or not has nothing to do with how much or how many people get it. We just know if they did or didn't have it. It's that same kind of logic that we have to resist in disciplinary data reporting. Now, the biggest problem that I had beyond people not wanting to report was wanting to underreport. They would get buyer's remorse. Today, when they were still all hot and heated and maybe got hit a time or two breaking up the fight, and there was blood on the floor and you were down the floor sliding around, or you had a big shiner under your eye with a cut in it like I had one time. Today it was a fight. Tomorrow you realize, ooh, I got to report that. Maybe that was just disruptive behavior. That would be the thing that I would get most often. Folks would go back in and they would cool off and think, well, this is going to make our school look bad. And so they'd get buyer's remorse for what they put in the day before once they'd cooled off and the kids weren't in the building and things had settled back down. And so then they'd want to go in and lessen the actual infraction. Now, Power School tracks that. That's called the exceptions list. And then you're going to be asked by your district, the person in your district that's in charge of this, usually the assistant superintendent or deputy superintendent that's in charge of this, why you did that. That used to be me at one point in my career. Because you thought about it and cooled off doesn't change what happened. Or you think about the implications of the bad publicity for your school. That doesn't change what happened. What happened is an incident. All the rest of those are outcomes or consequences or political or reporting issues. But that has nothing to do with the incident itself. And once you understand that we report incidents, things are going to go a whole lot easier for you once you understand that. And here is all the laws and policies. Here's the first. This is, again, state board policy. This is a policy. But it comes out of General Statute 115C. General Statute, that's the legislature. They said this is what must be reported. Then the state board adopted this policy and said these specific things we want to see. So again, we see the combination of a law and a policy. And this manual switches back and forth and it attempts to clarify it for you. But you will see the moving back and forth between law and policy. But it doesn't really matter. Both of them mean you must do this. It means it's not optional. That's what it really means. And so here are the big things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. These are acts of violence. These are the ones that count against you in the calculation for a persistently dangerous school. No Child Left Behind, we've talked about that in 1991, had two big ticket items in it. One was no child goes to a low performing school academically, no child has to go to an unsafe school. They deemed that persistently dangerous. State of North Carolina defined it as these 9 things. If you have more than 0.5% of these per year, that means one incident for every 200 students or 5 for every 1,000. If you exceed that level of these acts of violence, you go on a watch list for a year and get audited and have safety checks and those things. You go on the second year, we're going to reconstitute your school. Just like low performing. You can't have a persistently dangerous school. These are the 9 things that count against you in that federal determination. Homicide, assault resulting in serious bodily injury, assault involving using a weapon, rape, sexual offense, sexual. Now, you say, but Dale, I don't know what that means. I had a principal that argued that he shouldn't have to report a homicide on his campus. I'm not making this up. And his argument was it happened after 2:15 when the bell rang. It happened at 2:30. And I said, but Ron, that child is still dead. He's in your parking lot. I'm telling you, it's a tragic story. I'm not making light of this. But again, if it happens on your campus, day or night, doesn't matter. If it happens at your bus stop, portal to portal, coming to the bus stop, at the bus stop, at school, in the bus, you own it. It's yours. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, well, what does serious bodily injury really mean? Well, the good thing that I love about this manual, if you go to the very end, it tells you exactly in embarrassing detail when we get to the sexual stuff, which I will not read. Remember, I'm an old-time Baptist. It tells you exactly what it means. Every one of these, the state has defined these things down to, I don't even want to look at some of them, but you go to the back of the manual and it tells you exactly. And so you say, well, do I really have to go by this manual? I'll give you an example on the very first one, assault resulting in serious personal injury. So we had a public separate school there in Charlotte, Mecklenburg for our most violent students, self-contained. One of the behavior modification technicians got hurt really badly. He got his arm caught in the panic room door somehow, and it just about tore his arm off. He was out of work for 6 months, had to have multiple surgeries to reattach his arm, had very limited use of his arm permanently after that. I mean, it was a tragic situation for him. And when his sick days ran out, of course, he filed for workman's compensation and his claim was denied. And so it came, of course, to my desk as to why was this man's claim denied. He obviously met the criteria for assault resulting in serious personal injury. So I, went over, it wasn't very far from where my office was downtown with this public safety school. I went over and I asked, why did you put this in as a simple assault with no injury? And her response to me, the person who entered this, and I can't make this up, she said, well, he'll eventually be able to use his arm again. That's not what happened. What happened was an assault with serious injury. You reported what you hope will be an outcome somewhere down the road in 2 or 3 years when he can use his arm again. We report what happened. Now, because you reported his assault without injury, our district has denied his workman's comp claim. We're going to get sued now. We are being sued now. These are the kind of implications that you get into when, for reasons, I said, well, why'd you put it in this way? The man was, well, that might have put us over the limit on those violent acts for this year. Again, that's an outcome. That's not an incident. You've got to do the right thing. Well, I'll guarantee you the next principal, the new one, shortly thereafter, understood that you don't monkey with the acts of crime and violence, because if you do, you get sued. Not only was it the wrong thing for us to do for the system not support our people, but it was wrong legally as well. And so we had to have a new principal, and that happens from time to time. But that's what we're talking about here is you must know these definitions. Now you say, well, Dale, a lot of these minor infractions in here that they mention, and I'll show you a list of them, there's no definitions in here, but here's the trick. See all these things here that have all these that have a PD or RO code on them, they're defined by the state for you. And you say, well, a lot of these UBs, like dress code violation, they're not defined by the state. Your local code of conduct defines all unacceptable behavior. So if we go into, and let me do that right quick. If we go into our, and that's why I have the code of conduct here for you to look at. I'll guarantee you, when we look at your code of conduct, and I hope I'm still sharing, it's going to have a definition of all the minor stuff. See, it's going to have all, there it all is, and it's going to tell you exactly what that means. So it has all your, conduct, safe harbor provision, all that stuff, but it's also going to speak to all of these things, what's going to happen, but it's going to define for you when I get here. It's going to, what attendance means, what food or beverage, student dress, there you go, right there. It's going to tell you exactly what it means. So you have to juggle the state manual of what you got to do with your local board adopted code of conduct that says this is how we're going to do it. You got to put those two together. You put the state manual with your local manual, which is your code of conduct, and you have to know those two documents intimately in order to correctly enter information into PowerSchool. Now, I'm going to tell you, I don't mean to sound ugly or mean or any of that, but you get this wrong, we'll get somebody else, because there's a lot of money tied to this stuff coming. They tie this to all of your alternative and your safe school money and your alternative schools and all those salaries. They tie all of that money to this reporting. That's how they enforce compliance. Remember, It's law and policy, so they're allowed to do that. When I say they, I'm talking about the General Assembly, the state board, and through them DPI. And so when DPI would call me, they'd say, we'll flip the switch. Now what that meant was this month, we wasn't going to get that $40 million from them this month that paid all our people, kept all of our alternative and private separate schools open. We had several of them in a big district like Charlotte Meck. And so we were getting $40 million a month to keep those things going. Can you imagine having, 1 month of a $40 million shortfall, even a big district? And that's what they wouldn't say, we're going to cut your money off. They would simply say, we're going to flip your switch. If you don't do this, or if you don't address that, or if you don't stop them from doing this or that, we're going to flip the switch, which means next month you get no money. And so that's why this is, again, you say, well, Dale, you said, but money was the most important thing about your job. Understanding disciplinary data reporting is about money. They have tied this reporting to money. General Assembly, State Board, and through them, DPI, have tied disciplinary data reporting to your local money. Remember, we talked about when the state sends you money, they don't send you all of it at the beginning of the year. They send it in 10 installments at the end of the month, not at the beginning. And they just subtract your attendance data from that, whatever percentage was out. Well, that's what we're talking about. If you don't send them your attendance data, they don't send you any money. If your school activity reports, if you don't send them that, in terms of class sizes and that, they don't send it to you. And if you don't send them your disciplinary data, they won't send you your money that month. Now, they won't stop all of your money. Just like for this particular piece in Charlotte-Mecklenburg during my years was $40 million a month. It paid for all of our alternative schools, all the staff, paid for several other. We actually were running 2 schools entirely out of this budget, 2 out of this budget, and some alternative schools as well. So when you're running 1 alternative school, we consolidate them in 2 public separates out of this money. Yeah, and it's $40 million a month. You'll give them their data and you'll do it right. So again, disciplinary data is about money. It's about the state withholding their monthly payment to you or partial of that payment to you if you don't get this right.
Dr. Lamb, would you comment on Katie's
Let me catch it right quick.
Yeah.
All right, so Katie asked about the number of suspensions. It's not the suspensions themselves that get you in trouble, Katie. It's the actions that it's the incident that brought them about. But you're exactly right. A lot of districts are focusing on restorative justice now, and rightfully so, to try to avoid the incidents, because there is severe penalty if big incidents occur. That is correct. And I can never know what's in people's hearts. All I can say is regardless of why they're doing the right thing, they're doing the right thing. But you're exactly right. I suspect they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. It's a financial incentive. That is correct. There is a financial disincentive if you don't do that. It's not the suspensions themselves that get you in trouble as a district or a school. It's what the kids did to get suspended that causes you the trouble. So we have to focus on the incident, and that's what restorative justice does. Restorative justice focuses on stopping the incidents, not just abrogating the punishment. I give you less punishment, things are okay. No, you still did what you did. I had a middle school principal who went on TV unauthorized in Charlotte, which never happened. Went on TV and said, we had no out of school suspensions for fighting this year. And I was like, holy crap, this is not going to go well. And so what she had done is just said, we're not going to suspend kids for fighting. Fighting was the worst that we'd ever seen at that building because kids knew they weren't going to get suspended. See, she thought that the suspension numbers were what mattered. No, the behavior at the building was what mattered. She got it wrong, and and she got to go home. But that's another story again. But the state was not happy about that. That cost us a little money. And so, but Katie is correct. A lot of districts' initiatives, on whether we believe they're doing it from the goodness of their heart or not, they're about trying to stop making the funds prevent the crime, trying to do programs, conflict management, conflict resolution, they're trying to do things to stop the bad things from happening before they happen. That's what I was talking about. Make sure you look at that PowerPoint that I did on antecedent behaviors. That's part of that. Schools got to address the little things before they become the big things. You got to spend time, effort, and energy, and that's not just about punishing them for the little things. It's about trying to do restorative justice kind of things to try to stop kids from doing those things. It's about education. It's about programs. It's about working with kids, about counseling, to try so that the little things don't become the big things. But again, it's not the suspensions per se that gets you in trouble. It's what the kids did to get suspended that gets you. And yes, that's why we're focused on restorative justice more nowadays, as we should be. Okay, so those are, let me move that out of the way and scratch my nose. So if you understand that, the rest of this manual gets much easier to understand. And as I told you, back to the law part, the reason why you have to put everything in here is since 2014, Power School is used for Office of Civil Rights reporting. Now, I told you I retired a few years before that. In 2010, Dr. Stedman, we retired somewhere around there. I had to do it by hand. I had to pull all this data and send a separate report to OCR. It's now in Power School. That's another legal reason why now you got federal law that says you got to put it in, because Office of Civil Rights, that's federal. And we're required to do reporting to them every year about who got suspended and why and those things. And so since that is pulled now from Power School since 2014, now there's federal law that says you got to follow all these rules and put it in there. So we got the General Assembly, state law, we got federal law, we got board policy from the state board that says you will do these things. And then you got your local board policy through your code of conduct that says you will do it this way as well. So everybody has lined up behind this. So if you choose not to do this, you have zero ground to stand on legally if you choose not to do what this manual tells you to do. And so that's why you lose your job. It's a class 1 misdemeanor. It's an actual violation of the law not to do what this manual says to do. It's not optional. It's not a suggestion. It's not a best practice. It's the law. So now, zero tolerance expulsions. We hit upon that one last week or week before last, case study before last with Jimmy. Cheating strike, was it Billy? With Billy in our cheating case. He effectively got a zero tolerance suspension. He did not get to, he got put out for a year. That's an expulsion. Although failing for the year is being, is an expulsion for the year. And so these have to be reported and they are against the law. And so again, this is federal law. That was a violation of federal law. What happened, what the teacher attempted to do to Billy in our first case was a violation of federal law. Principal could not support, again, we want to support teachers, but the teacher violated federal law. We can't support her. She violated state law. She violated State Board of Education policy on grading. That's a trifecta. She got federal law, state law, and board policy. She violated all three. We have no leg to stand on to support her. Again, it says right here, it's federal law. Can't do that. And then it tells you everything that has to be reported. Everything that has to be reported. All of these things, and pretty much you say, well, what's it got? What? There's really nothing. Everything that happens in school that gets a disciplinary referral should go in here. That's what this says. And then it defines for you persistently dangerous, the reports of violence, and it gives you a lot of different scenarios, how you would actually enter those in. And it has all of, I like this list. Use the following guidelines. Decide which offenses to report. Now, what this means is you're not deciding whether or not to report it. We're talking about when, a kid uses a knife to assault somebody. That's two. That's possession of a weapon and assault with a weapon. This tells you what order you put them in. There's a primary and secondary incident that has occurred. It tells you all of those kinds of things. So that, see, one of the things that I had some schools to do, they figured out they would hide the serious stuff as a secondary underneath. They would have some, again, I'll use the example. A kid brings a knife to school and he stabs somebody. They would put it in as a simple possession of weapon as the primary incident. Then underneath that, on the back pages, they would put that he stabbed and hurt somebody. So that when the report was run, you didn't see that he had stabbed and assault with injury. Assault with weapon is one of those acts of violence that counts against you. Possession of a weapon is not. Let me say that again. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. Assault involving the use of a weapon is a PD, persistently dangerous. One of those acts of violence, that one counts against you. When you put it in, it has this prefix. Now, possession of a weapon, a simple possession of a weapon is a simple RO. It's a reportable offense. Possession of a weapon is not a PD. So what they would do is they would report, the initial report would be possession of a weapon. Underneath that, on the secondary incident, it would be assault using a weapon. And so when the statisticals were run, that would not show up against them. That's illegal, by the way. Again, back to this list of things, it says, here is how you will do it, so that you're not allowed to hide more serious behaviors underneath less serious behaviors for the express intent of not reporting those violent infractions that occur on your campus. I know I'm getting down in the weeds a little bit here, but stay with me. Many times when an incident occurs on your campus, it has multiple facets to it. And what the state wants you to understand is you report the most serious one first. You don't do it chronologically. And see, that's what a school would argue. Well, the kid brought the knife first before he stabbed somebody second. No, you report the more serious one first, that he stabbed somebody. Well, if we do that, it's going to show up against us. It's going to count against us. Can't help that. Nowhere in the manual does it say follow all these federal, state, and local rules unless you don't want to. You can't pull the 12-year-old deal, don't want to. Most 12-year-olds, if you've ever been in middle school, most 12-year-olds, 6th or 7th grade, used to be 7th graders, that was their standard response, don't want to. Why didn't you do your homework? Don't want to. Didn't want to. Why didn't you do this, that, didn't want to. Well, you can't pull that on disciplinary data. And so the state has defined all of these scenarios for you where you can't go in and do those kinds of things. Now, seclusion and restraint, if you do that, you have to report it if it's unlawful, and it has in here all the different definitions of that. That's another thing that you have to report as well, along with with OCR and separate reporting on zero tolerances, seclusion and restraint. And so those are the things that you have to report on your campus. Again, it has all of these different statutes, everything that you have to do. How you go about doing all of these different things. It has about, if you send a kid to an alternative program, it has all the reporting on that. All of that's in here. And then it has all your codes and descriptions for Power School, has all of your behavior types, your incident types. It has them coded. Any of them that are RO, you have to report to the police. any of them that are PD, going to count against you, and you have to report them to the police. There are 4 UBs, which is unacceptable behavior, that still have to be reported to the police because they have a suffix, and that is communicating threats. Although it has a UB prefix, because it has a general statute suffix, that means you still have to tell the police. You have communicating threats, alcohol possession, affray, disorderly conduct. They're right there together. Those 4, even though, and there's one more right here, burning of a school building. Even though they have UB prefixes, you still have to report them for law enforcement. Here are all the different codes you have to put in, your recording categories. We have where it occurred, the consequence type, and even if you just conferenced a kid, you still got to report it. See 6023 right here, conference. So, and then we have victim types, weapon types, all of those things. And then we have our acts of crime and violence definitions in the back. So you can't argue that you didn't know that's what that was. And then we have use of information from juvenile courts. That's an appendices to this. So between this and your district code of conduct, you have to know your reporting rules. Now, I've been careful and I haven't said anything until now. This has nothing to do with PBIS. Let me say that again. The system of discipline you use in your school, that's up to your school and district. That has nothing to do with this. This is about reporting what happened and following the rules of reporting. This is about keeping your job. Now, PBIS may or may not be working in your school, and if that's the system of discipline you use, that's fine. It does not conflict or clash or in contrast to this. This is about reporting, and your code of conduct is again about definitions and about assigning the amount of discipline. This is, the state doesn't give you any guidelines in terms of assigning how much discipline you should assign. They don't care. It's up to you. That's in your code of conduct. This is about reporting. This is about keeping the money coming every month. Again, you lose your job, money or honey, this is money. If you want to keep your money coming every month from the state, you have to give them 3 things. You have to give them attendance data, school class size teacher data on your school activity report, your SAR. Your attendance data is on your PMR, Principal's Monthly Report. Again, it's in Power School. PMR is in Power School, SAR is in Power School, disciplinary data is in Power School. Those 3 things have to be given to the state every month for them to cut the check and give you your money for that month. If you don't, you will not get your check. They will flip the switch. That doesn't have to happen but one time. Or you have to, they give you money and you have to subvert money. You have to give money back. Revert money back to them. That doesn't go well either. That doesn't happen but one time either. And so disciplinary data reporting, you will, when you get your AP job, you will more than likely be the person in charge. Principals ultimately, as I've told you a week before last, principals ultimately responsible for what goes in, but there's going to be one person on your school. That's usually the new AP. That's the disciplinary data manager, because nobody wants that job because it's such a high risk job in terms of you can lose your job. So nobody wants to do that. So the new AP will be the disciplinary data manager 90% of the time. You're responsible for what goes in on a day-to-day basis and that it gets in, and in a timely manner. Timely manner is, by state definition, is 24 to 48 hours. If it's a non-police involved incident, it better be in 24 hours. You got up to 48 if it's police involved. So sometimes there's investigations. Outside of that time frame, you're risking your job. You can't just let referrals pile up to the end of the week and put them in on Friday, or I'll get them next Friday. No, it's not the way it works. Now, remembering that Power School is now real time. Charlotte-Mecklenburg was the last of the districts we converted while one of my last big jobs there over to the state servers. Remember, it's 24 hours. They're 24 hours. They update every night. They know what happened yesterday in your building. and they want to know. You can't put this off. It's got to go in there. More than likely, it's going to be your job in your first AP position. This is going to be your job to make sure it gets in there and it gets in there right. Principal's ultimately responsible, but the principal will throw you under the bus. And so, again, this is about money. This is what keeps them. Three things keeps the state money flowing: attendance, classes, disciplinary data. That's what that's what keeps the money going. It's all in Power School. And if you don't know how, you'll need to learn how quickly to enter this into your disciplinary module. All right. Anybody have any questions? I know that was kind of long and drawn out. I apologize for ranting for 30 minutes, but this couldn't be more important. This is the one that at the school level, this one gets you more than anything else. Moving the money around at the superintendent level is what gets you. At the school level, it's disciplinary data and all the antecedents that go with that. That's what gets you. Thank you, Ingrid, for that comment. All right, anybody have anything else? I'm so excited for case studies next week again. I get to sit back and let y'all rant instead of me. Well, I still rant some. Anything else for anybody tonight?
Just remind them to make sure that you're not waiting until the last minute to work on your competency folio, and we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We talked about getting to that tonight, but we'll get to that soon. Yeah. That's beginning to break. Yeah, we're gonna need to work on our competency folios.
They all know what to do. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah, we'll talk more about those. Everybody is about to the point where you're going to have all of your artifacts for the semester. So hopefully, thank you, Eric. So hopefully, my plan is once we get all of our artifacts done by doing the OMA and the skip, then we can run in and see what else we need to kind of fill in and go. Some people like to work on them on their own, and those people are doing that. That's fine. But we'll have a night where we sit and we'll pull out those and look at what you ought to have and where you can put them in.
And the only thing that you
plug play.
Have the School of Ed, you've got to do. The School of Ed dispositions, you can go ahead and do that.
You can do those anytime. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do a competency analysis in 603 in your DRF portfolio. You only have to do your own personal dispositions. You can go ahead and do those, and then your competency folio is the only other thing. It's pretty much plug and play, and 603 will show you exactly where. There aren't dozens of artifacts in 603. There's pretty much one, and we'll show you what it is. Again, if you've got that list that I published, it's actually in our shell. And so Katie said she created a chart to see which competencies require which task artifacts. She can send that. That'd be great. I'll get that out to everybody, and I'll resend mine. I'll also resend mine on what task of the skip and the OMA where you'll find your competency artifacts. I'll send that as well. All right. Dr. Stedman, close us out tonight. Again, prayers for Paulette.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, and I've said it before. I'm very proud of this class, and that's why I don't have to, but I join in every week because I enjoy being with this class so much. And I thank Dr. Lamb for allowing me to be a part of it. All of you have a great and safe
holiday,
4th of July, and just be careful out there.
Yeah, everybody have a good time on your holiday. Take some time. Take some time for yourself. Things are good. Y'all are ahead. Y'all are such a great group, and I'll see you again next week.
They are. Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right.